What did you do before you became a missionary?
I was a fireman.
Okay. And you said you moved to Florida when you were 18?
21.
21? And how did your wife got you going to church?
Yep.
And so you started going to church, you accepted the Lord, you were working in the ministry at that time, youth or something like that?
We were helping the youth.
Okay.
And then we were helping with the youth, and then kind of, I wouldn't say we were giving it 100%. We were doing it, but it wasn't really like our complete passion. I loved being a fireman, but I had a business, and I think that's where all of our focus was. And so God kind of really, at 35, impressed on me that I was living my life for the wrong things, because I actually felt like I was going to have a heart attack at 35 from all the stress.
Of being
a fireman, having a business, and trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Okay. And so how did you were serving in the church, how did you even know about missions? Or
Our church in Florida is a very missions-minded church. In fact, the church I grew up in it wasn't a Baptist church. It was a different church, and I grew up in it, and I'd never heard of missions. I started going to church with my wife. We started going to the church in Florida, our Ascendant Church, and started hearing about missionaries. We'd have missionaries come in, and being a businessman and a fireman, I would see the missionaries and think, if I could get some of these guys to come work for me, man, they're good salesmen. And the Lord just, every time we heard a missionary, we could say, oh man, we could go to that country. We could go to that country. And the Lord began giving us a burden for every field that was out there. And I think that's how God began working in our lives, was just having missionaries come into the church and getting to meet them, getting to spend time with them, and seeing their passion, their burden for the countries. And that's kind of translated into, as God was working in our lives through that, I think that was really key in us surrendering to missions.
Okay. And how did you get interested in the country of Wales?
I'll back up. We met a missionary to Wales a long time ago, and we went out to lunch with them, and I remember Mary was thinking, wow, I could never go to that country. Because that's how God works. First he says something, and then you're like, oh no, I'll never do that or couldn't do it. And I've learned never to say never. And then over the years, we had other missionaries come in. It was in our conference in 2009 that there was a missionary to Wales there. And like our video, you see all the churches that were closing. And somehow I got this strange thinking that if I could do something in Wales, it would change the churches here in America. Because they say statistically, America is about 15 years behind Wales. And I think we see that. I think we see churches here that are struggling. Churches that once had, say, 200-300 people are now down to a core group. And Wales is very much like that. A big church in Wales would be 40, 50 people. So this would be almost a mega church in Wales.
Okay. And so how did God start working in your heart to go to Wales?
Well, I go back to when I was a fireman and we had our business. I would work one day on, have 2 days off. I had a business. Our business was doing really good financially, and it was we were to the point where if we wanted anything, we'd go out and buy it. It wasn't an issue. But yet, at 35 years old, I felt like I was going to have a heart attack from the stress of everything. Had people working for us, all kinds of stuff. And God made it clear to me. He spoke to me during that time, and he said, you know what, Greg, you're living your life for you. You're not living your life for me. And it was a Sunday morning. I told the Lord, you know what, God, you're right. I'll do whatever you want me to do. And ironically, Mary came out of the same service and said she did the same thing in the service. 2 years, we began asking God, okay, what does this mean? We started seeing missions everywhere we would go. He would lay missions on our heart. We drove down the road one time. We see a Levi's jean billboard and saw missions in it. But then, as I was saying this morning, but then we began to say, oh, well, surely God would never call firemen to do missions. And I actually was thinking about this one day. I was thinking, here's God up in heaven, and he's looking down, and here's this fireman crawling into this burning building, rats and roaches coming out. I think God looked and said, hey, I think this guy's dumb enough to do it. I think we'll call him into missions. And so we surrendered to missions in 2009 at our conference, and it was, I literally went from being a fireman to... I retired at the fire department August 10th, and August 20th I started classes at Baptist Bible College. So, God took us right from being in the world, being a lay person, right into missions. And you want to talk about feeling inadequate. I went to college at 39 years old. I was intimidated because these kids in college grew up in church. They knew the Bible better than I knew the Bible. But I just kept clinging to the fact that God doesn't call those who are equipped. He equips those he calls. And one of the biggest struggles as a husband, and I think most men could relate to this, one of the biggest struggles I had when we surrendered to missions was we had a lot of money. When we went off to Bible college, we had no money. And my biggest fear was, how am I going to provide for my family? And the thing is God provides. And I couldn't tell you all the ways he's done it, but he does. I mean, I was talking this morning, we're driving a brand new vehicle. God provided that for us while we were on deputation. He did it through my wife's parents, but he does that. He provides for you in the most unique, intricate ways. But first, he wants to see you step out in faith and say, okay, God, I'll do what you want me to do.
So your biggest, I'm thinking about this, the conference theme, stepping out.
Yep.
And it's time to step out. And so for you, your biggest fear was financial, stepping out.
Yeah.
And so as you, what was the final thing that made you just step out? Here he is, he's living the American dream, right? I mean, he's a fireman, and then got his own business.
Yep.
Plenty of money. That's the American dream, right? That's what everybody in America says they want. Okay? And then here he is living the American dream, and all of a sudden, you got to step out.
Yeah.
So what made you take that step to go out?
That's the hardest thing, is that first step. But we felt God really working in our hearts. And really what it boiled down to was, I knew that was the only way I was going to be completely happy. I mean, we were living the American dream, but I'll be honest, I wasn't happy in the American dream. I had a good job. I was driving the ladder truck at the fire department. I mean, I basically reached the pinnacle of my career, and I remember thinking at work, I can just sit back and all the guys beneath me, they could do all the work. I didn't do that, but I was in a position where really the younger guys had to do everything, and I could sit back, and I was at a point in my life where I could coast. And the reality was God just he was there nagging. He was there continually. And I could have said, no, I'm not going to do that, but I felt like I made a promise to the Lord. And I don't know, I grew up in a generation where if you tell somebody you're going to do something, you do it. Well, I made a promise to God, and I couldn't back out of it. I said, all right, God, I'll go wherever you want me to go. I'll do whatever you want me to do. And so he's called me into missions. And like I said, no, not me. I mean, I didn't like speaking in public. I didn't feel knowledgeable enough in the Bible. I didn't feel like I was prepared. I still to this day think, you're a pastor? That's funny. But that's God. I grew up in Connecticut, and I had to go to Florida to get saved. And sometimes I think we can look at our lives and we can think, I'm not qualified, but it's not about that. It's about being willing to do what the Lord wants you to do. And he qualifies you, and he prepares you, and he uses everything in your life for where he sends you. And I look at the fire department and my upbringing, and I look at the country of Wales, and I see how, looking back, my life was preparation for where we are right now. And so my biggest thing was, the hardest thing, I always tell people, the hardest thing is taking that first step.
Okay.
You never know how God is going to provide for you until you blindly step out in faith.
Now, what was your wife's reaction when you finally said, all right, this is it. We're getting rid of all the stuff.
Yeah.
Getting rid of the, I'm sure your life was known. I mean, you knew what was going on.
Yep.
And so all of a sudden you say to your wife, hey, we're going to Wales across the ocean. What was her reaction?
Well, fortunately, and I think God does this. I know God does this. He was working in her heart as well as he was working in my heart. I think if you're called into ministry, I believe God will call your spouse into ministry as well. Because we needed to both be on the same page. There was, though, difficulty. There is the difficulty of like women are nesters. They like their house, they nest, and they have to be comfortable. So there is a certain sense of we're stepping out completely out of our comfort zone into the great unknown. It's like, I think of Peter walking on the water. It was just like that.
Yeah.
As soon as you take that first step, man, he's walking on water. But the moment we take our eyes off of the Lord, you begin to sink. And that's how it is in our lives. We have to be willing to go. It's not easy. It's difficult. We struggle still in Wales. We'll be in a store talking, and people are standing there looking at you like this. And you're like, do I smell? It's because we got a different accent. And they look at us, and everybody always says, oh, hey, are you from Canada? I'm like, no, eh? or they'll say, oh, you've got an accent. And I say, I don't have one, you have one. But you have to be able to laugh at yourself. You have to be able to realize, and we've seen it, God provides your needs. He provides your comfort. Another example, I could talk all day, but the house we live in right now, we were looking for a house because our stuff was coming over from America, and we had to be in a house. And this was the only house we could get in, and we walked in, and houses in Wales are not like houses in America. They don't have closets. They're smaller. Our house has this hideous carpet in the living room, and that's normal to have that pink walls. And we walked in, first time we walked in, she's like, I can't live here. And it was the only house, so we had no choice but to move in, because over there, when you move over as a, how old was I? That's 15. 45-year-old male. You move over there, you're like an 18-year-old kid. You have no credit rating. You have no history. We had to put 6 months down on our house, and it was honestly the only house that was available. We moved in, and it's become, I mean, we don't want to move. We love our house. And the hideous carpet, it's so hideous, it matches everything. And the house was 20 minutes from the first work we were in, and we're thinking, oh, we got to drive 20 minutes. Well, about 6 months later, God changed our field to about 10 minutes away. So he knew before we even moved in that was our house. So it's difficult, but if you're willing to trust the Lord, he takes care of it. He takes care of everything.
Awesome. Tell me a little bit about Wales. I want to know a little bit about Wales, because as I look on the map,
yep.
There's England, there's Wales, Scotland, and now is Wales part of the UK? Is it like a different state? How does that all work? Because that's confusing to me.
I guess it's kind of like a state. Like we go into England shop, and it's not like you go through the border crossing. It's just like here in America going from Connecticut to Vermont. You just cross the line, you see a sign, welcome to Wales, welcome to England. But Wales is about the size of New Jersey, 3 million people, 12 million sheep. Where we live, you have to yield to the sheep. They walk in front of you. And it's just the way it is. The roads are nothing like in America. They're very narrow. We call them sheep paths. And it's complete. The culture is so different. They speak English, like my wife would say, it's different. You know, and the words we say are different than what they say. But it's completely different than anything you can imagine. Wales, England, and Scotland, the English hate the Welsh hate the English. Everybody hates the Scottish hate everybody. So depending where you're from, they know your accent, they know where you're from, they know everything. They're small. I think of like growing up in Connecticut. It was a small town. I was born in Pennsylvania. I moved to Connecticut in 6th grade. I consider Connecticut my home. But when I moved from Pennsylvania to Connecticut, it took 5 years before you guys accepted me. That's what it's like there, but it's different because it takes 20 years or more before they'll even acknowledge that you're a part of the community. So we will never, as Americans, be accepted as Welsh. It'll never happen. They'll always know that we're the crazy Americans. They'll always know where the Americans live. They'll always know everything about us because it's like small towns and small minds. Very hard to reach the Welsh people, but when you do finally reach them, they're stronger than family. They're like, it's a bond that you make with them that's like family. Like here in Connecticut, when I finally got in and you finally established yourself, I have friends here to this day that I keep in contact with.
Awesome. Now tell me a little bit, he talked a little bit on Sunday about working with kids.
Yep.
And and this is kind of a motivation for the church, because for them to work with kids, he had to take a class.
Yeah.
And there's all these regulations. In fact, they're a little apprehensive about working with kids because it's so difficult, all these government regulations. But here are some youth camps. Tell me about what you're doing there with the youth camps and some of the things you're wanting to do, the difficulties with working with children. Now,
the reason I have this picture in my video is because they sign a waiver. We can't show pictures of kids, just to give you an idea of what this DBS, this child protection is. Can't show pictures of kids. We can't show, or we can't be friends with them on Facebook. We can't have any texting or anything like that. At the camps, though, they come. The BBFI has a camp there, and this is pictures from that. And then there's another one, Lift Camp. So there's 2 different camps that come into the UK. But most of the time, it's kids from the churches that come. The BBF camp is more kids that have been saved in church, and it's more of the kids from the churches in the the different countries. Lift is more of kids that have never heard the gospel, but they get these kids to camp, and then we pour into them for a week. I think it's like camps here. You don't see large numbers of salvation. A lot of the kids at the Great Britain camp are already saved, but when we were there our first year, we saw 4 kids come to know Christ as their Savior, and that's a huge accomplishment. I think we had, I don't remember, 140 kids maybe, but it was really good. It was a great camp. This one has been done, I don't have pictures here. I have pictures on my phone. It's done at a, what's that house called? A manor house. So it's almost like a mini castle that they do it in. So if you ever think of the coolest camps, man, this is the most beautiful camp I've ever been at. They do a good job, but they invest in kids. At the end of August every year, there's a big camp reunion at one of the churches, and there's over 130 people that come, and you hear them singing. And when you're in Wales, and I'll tell you, as soon as we come to America, honestly, I feel like I got this weight off my shoulders. As soon as I land back in Manchester in November, you feel the spiritual darkness. And you go to this camp, and sometimes you wonder, like, we have 13 people average in our church, and you're like, that's pretty good. But then you go to this camp reunion meeting, there's 130 people. And so you see that even though we're a little church here, and there's a little church here and a little church here, you see, though, that as a whole, we're making a difference in the country. And that part's exciting.
Okay, that's awesome. We talked about your biggest fear.
Yep.
And now, since you went to Wales, now when we're talking about this step of faith, it's time to step out, okay? And so the thought for today, really, is what I want to get through to the people, is if we don't step out, we're not going to see God work. We don't wait for God to give us, all right, everything we need, all the money we need, all the resources we need. If we see a need and we're stepping out to do something for God, we need to step out. So since you stepped out, all right, you went to Wales and went to England and started, and I think you said a little bit, I caught a little bit about the church that happened there. So since you stepped out, what have you seen God do?
Well, we've seen, first, how God's changed our lives. We went over there with this preconceived idea of what we're going to do, and God's really made it clear how we're going to do ministry, how He wants it done in that country. We could talk about financial needs and stuff, and there's always, there's needs. To be in a country, like Pastor was saying in Romania, we can't work. We have to rely on churches to support us. Now, since we've been there, churches have dropped us. Some churches have raised our support. God always provides what we need every month.
But for instance, he's renewing his visa right now, and the cost is $10,000 to $12,000 to renew your visa.
And I would say on that, we just the beginning of last month, we had about $1,000 towards that, and it was kind of like, okay, we're going back to the States, God, and God works in His own timing. And I'll give you a warning of that right now. If you surrender to ministry, if God calls you into ministry, don't expect everything up front. He waits, and he waits till you're ready to be faithful to Him. Just before we came here, we don't have all of our money for our visas yet, but we're getting on the airplane, and I'm thinking, okay, God, I don't have it. I've left my dog in the country. We've left everything we have in the country, and we're coming over here because we have to be here. But I'm like, you know what, God, it's in your hands. And I already see how we have the money we need. It's not all there. It's promised. I guess the easiest thing to say is, by stepping out, I've gained the knowledge that God is going to provide everything that I need. Matthew 6:33. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. If you look at that passage, He's talking about our necessities. Clothing, He's provided it. Food, He provides it. Anything that we need, if we're seeking after Him, He provides. But it's not until you take that step. God doesn't say, here's the money, Greg, go apply for your visa. He says, no, Greg, I want you to apply for your visa and the money will be there. Don't worry. And it's there. We have 7,500 in now.
Okay. Awesome. So Hebrews says this, Hebrews 11:6, we know this verse, And it is impossible to please him without faith. Anyone who wants to come to him must believe that God exists and that he is a rewarder of those who sincerely seek him. Now, in this passage, Greg, what's the context? What examples did he give of faith here in this passage?
Well, he's talking about Abraham, how he stepped out. And you think of Abraham, he was willing to kill his son for God. And what did God do? He provided himself a sacrifice. You look at the men that were mentioned here, and it was because they had faith in God that God provided for them.
Right.
And that's how it is in our lives too. Until we have that faith, and I like to say it's blind faith. And in fact, I like to say it's silliness, really. I mean, because if you look at the world standard, the world would say, "Oh, you're foolish for what you do." My own family thought I was going through a midlife crisis when we surrendered to missions. My mom...
Are you still going through it?
I think so. I think I always will be. But I got lectured for over 2 hours when we told my mom I surrendered to mission. She's like, "You've got kids, you've got a job, and that's it. It's this foolishness that only a believer understands. I had other believers, and I'm just sad to say this, but other believers are like, "Why are you doing that? That's crazy." And it's like, if you don't understand, you don't understand. I mean, but when God gives you this burden, he lays this burden on your heart, you're not going to be happy until you fulfill that burden, and he's going to provide. God said, "I want you to go to Wales." I was foolish enough to say, "Okay, God, I'll go." And you know what? He provides.
And so faith is key. Now, I want you to think about this morning in your life. How am I going to step out on faith? What are you doing? How are you living your life by faith? Because our whole goal in our society is to get more comfortable.
Yeah, amen.
We want to get more comfortable. We want to get everything arranged. But I always, the Bible says we just shall live by faith. And so if we're not living by faith, we're not growing. And so we should always be stretching out by faith. Now, James, we read the passage in James. And he says, "What does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith, but does not have works?" Now, think about this. Faith without works is not faith. It's just words.
Amen.
I mean, anybody can say they have faith, right? I can get up here, and we get up here, and we talk about, "Oh, I got great faith, and God could do anything, and I believe God, and God's is big, and God's is powerful." Okay, what are you trusting him for right now? What are you stepping out? And so he says, can faith save him? And he says, if a brother or a sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you said to them, "Depart in peace, be warmed and filled," but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Doesn't help anybody, does it? Like, all right, I hope you get something to eat. And they're like, okay, thanks. Thanks for the advice. Oh, I'll pray. Oh, we like to do it. I'll pray for you. That's kind of like, sometimes, to be honest, we use "I'll pray for you" as an excuse not to get involved. Brother, I'll pray for you. I'll pray that somebody else will do what maybe I could be doing. That's what praying is. And so he says, what does it profit? He says, thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, what does James say? It is dead. It is useless. I mean, he could have been in his church saying, "I'm going to pray for Wales. And I'm going to, you know what? I'm going to send more of my money to Wales. And I'm going to pray. I'm going to fast 24/7 for Wales." But if God's saying, "No, I want you to go to Wales," how's that going to help? And so God had to send him out, send us out. So faith without works, like I said, is not faith. It's just words. It's just what we say. Now notice something. Now I want you to notice something here. Now this is theologically deep. Okay, so I want to prepare you guys for this, okay? What I'm going to say. All right? Because this is going to be, we're going to get your notebook. You want to write this down. This is going to be very, very deep, okay? He says, thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, it is dead. Okay? So faith without works is not faith, but faith is work. Think about that. Faith is work. We think of, now we have this idea of faith, all right, fire coming down from heaven, right? Or, something, we're out there and it's sunny and we say, God, bring the storm clouds, and they come and it starts raining. That's what we think of faith, okay? But we don't think of faith in the terms of the daily grind. Okay? But if you think of this passage, James saying, you're going to help somebody and you're going to give them, well, that's going to cost you time, that's going to cost you effort, that's going to cost you work. Okay? And as we do ministry, we're doing it by faith, right? We want to step out by faith. We want to step out and see what God is going to do, right? Whether that's with our Awana program or our team program or some of the sports ministries we want to do. We're stepping out by faith, trusting God is going to do something. But remember, faith is work. It is work. It is not all glorious. Now, you're probably, how long you been there?
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years?
Yeah.
I say, well, you're still in the honeymoon stage a little bit.
Yeah.
But when you get on the field, you realize it's a lot of work, don't you?
It is a lot of work, yeah. Yeah, and it's a different kind of work. It's not what you expect, but it is. It's dirty work. You have to deal with things and deal with people. You have to love people where they are, and not, people aren't always easy to love. People are difficult to love, but you have to do it. You have to be like Christ. And it is work. If you want music in your church, well, you know what? I had to learn to play guitar so we could have music. If you want outreach, you're it. Until you can get people who come in and their hearts are willing to work, everything is on you. And it's like I like to tell the people, I can grow a church so far, but it's the people that grow the church. Until the people come in and they're excited about church and they invite people to church and they get involved in church, never going to grow. We're never going to see the Lord truly work. And you have to expect God to do big things. And you have to cast. We spend a lot of time casting vision. And you have to cast vision because people have to see God working. And you're not going to see God work until you get involved, until you work, until you surrender, until you say, okay, God, here I am.
Until you get out there.
Yeah.
If you go out there and start trusting, hey, God's going to work through this.
Absolutely. You go and you put, like us, we put flyers indoors because it's legal there. And we do 2,000 flyers, and honestly, we were astonished that 24 people, astounded, I think, my English is bad today. 25 people we've had visit. It wasn't because of me, it's God, but I had to go out and we had to walk. My kids, they come out and they help us. And if we had everybody in our church doing that, we could do 1,000 a week or more. But you have to do the work to see the results. I don't necessarily, we did 2,000 postcards. I had a person who came because of our website. I had a person who came because of an ad. And I always used to say when we were in one church, we'd go out and we'd do visitation. And go out and you'd never get anything done. Nobody would be home. But because we were faithful and we were out there doing the work, God brings people. He wants to see our faith.
James goes on to say, and he says, but someone will say, you have faith, and I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith, what? By my works. There again, that word works. Okay, we have faith that God is going to work. We believe Him, so let's get busy doing. Sometimes I've noticed this, and that stepping out on faith is sometimes God works in the littlest things. Sometimes they're a tremendous effort for us, and it takes a lot of work. And I can remember when we did the float. We did a float this year, and it was and getting involved in the parade, and it was a lot of stress because it's something we didn't do, and it was a lot of work, and we had a lot of people come and help, and we built it, and it was work, but we have some people coming to church today because of that. And so it was work, and it was faith. You follow what I'm saying? I mean, all right, faith. I believe God's going to do this, so I'm going to work towards that. It all goes together. And so faith isn't just, yeah, I believe God, and I'm going to sit around and wait till he does something. That's not faith. Faith is going out and working and stepping out. Stepping out by faith is stepping out. Think about this. It's stepping out to work. I know we don't like work. Don't we want vacation, right? We want the glory. We want all that stuff. And that comes. It's the blessings come through work. But when we step out by faith, it's stepping out also to work. It takes effort, time, and work. I mean, when I came here, I realized it was going to take 12-hour days of work to begin to get the church going again, being able to visit people and get out in the community. It takes work. And so faith and stepping out is something that goes together. And so the challenge for us this morning is, how am I going to step out in faith? Or let me rephrase it. How am I going to step out and work? Because it takes effort, right? In everything we do. How are we going to step out on faith? And he goes on in James, says, you believe that there is one God, you do well. Even the demons believe and tremble. But do you want to know, O foolish man, that faith without works is dead? Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered Isaac his son on the altar? Do you see that faith was working together with his what? Works. And by works, faith was made what? Perfect. And so, faith and works go together. And when we trust God and step out, as my brother's gone to Wales, he's got this group of people, and God has just worked one thing out after another. But if he didn't take that step and also make the effort, how many years were you on deputation?
About 2.5.
2.5 years going on. I felt bad for him last night, traveling up from, and he said, we'll leave at Tennessee, he'll be there at 10. I'm like, no, he won't be there at 10. And coming in with all the kids, and they're all, and they're all like groggy like this, and I can see the parents, say hi to the pastor, say hi to the pastor. I'm like, don't worry about it. They're half asleep. And there's a lot of pressure, because then you come to church, you never know what the church is going to be like, just to make them feel good, ask them some really off-the-wall questions after the church. And so you never know. You go to all these churches, and you have to, it's almost like a performance thing. And how are they going to perform? And so it's a difficult thing, driving all those miles, and then the work of going to the field, trying to adapt to a different culture. And I know what it is. As soon as they hear the American accent, or they find out you're American, man, that's it. That's it. Anyway, I don't know. I remember when I was in Scotland, and the guy found out I was American. Man, he gave us a private tour, because a church in America had helped the church there. And when they find you, it's just a curiosity. It's almost like you're in a fishbowl. So, oh, that's the American. I want to go be friends with him. I want to see him, talk with him, and ask him about Obama and all those things. And so it's just that kind of... one of the things that is different coming back is kind of like you're just one of everybody else.
I don't hear. I miss the British accent. And it's weird to come back and not have people stare at you when you talk.
Yeah, and that's just how it is, and that's how it is on the mission field. But that's part of. You think of Abraham, okay? Now, how old was Abraham when he offered Isaac?
Oh, he's got to be.
I mean, you don't have to tell me the exact age.
Yeah, but you figure he was 100 when he had him.
Right.
Roughly thereabouts. So he had to be 110.
Right. So
ballpark.
Here he is, older. Okay, and you think that, all his testing was done.
Yeah.
And then God says, bring up your son Isaac. And he had to go, and he had to climb the mountain. He had to bring the wood and go by faith that God was going to provide. But notice what he says. You see that faith was working together with his works. And by works, faith was made perfect. His faith was made perfect by believing in God. So the question we need to ask ourselves this morning, do we believe God can save us? I mean, if you die tonight, do you know exactly if you go to heaven? The Bible says, whoever will call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Do you believe that? Okay, you can believe in your heart, but have you actually done it? Now, do you believe God will work if you step out? Step of faith. Maybe it's faith promise. Maybe it's increasing your faith promise at the end of the mission month. Maybe it's getting involved. And we've had some people step up to get involved in Awana. And maybe it's, and we're going to be talking about the senior ministry coming up and some of the things that are going on there. If we'll step out, this morning I had a guy, some of you saw, this guy came randomly, saw the sign faith. I don't know, a whole long story, but he's got a whole story. Obviously God's working in his life, but there are people all around us that are hurting, empty, and crying out. And so we need to step out and go out and find them and show them the love of Christ. And then are you willing to not just step out, okay, but work by faith? In other words, after the first emotion, I'm going to get involved, and we have the first meeting, we're all excited, and then reality sets in. These kids are driving me crazy. Or this guy keeps saying he's going to come to church, doesn't come. So you have all this, what he's talking about, the reality, the stuff, the things going on. And so what do you have to do? You have to put your hand to the plow and keep working. And keep trusting God. And keep believing and keep putting faith in him that he is going to work. The Bible says this, and we read it before, and it is impossible to please God without faith. Without faith, we cannot please God. But the person who wants to come to him has to believe that God exists, and that he rewards those that seek him. And I think that's what Greg's talking about, what I can testify. So many blessings when we seek the Lord. We're so blessed. And God works in awesome ways. And we see awesome things happen when we believe God and trust him. And so, as the worship team comes, the girls come up, we're going to have a song and invitation. I want you to ask, how does God want you to step out in faith? Maybe it's to get involved in something. Maybe it's to pray about giving to missions financially. Maybe it's to work on a relationship or go visit a neighbor. I think about this. Greg's willing to step out and go to Wales. Take his family and drag them around and put them on a plane and go to some small house in the middle of a village and go over there and go through all that effort and face all the documentation and go in the passport office. He's willing to do that. He's willing to step out. Let me ask you, are you willing to step out, go to your neighbor? Because that's really where I'm going. It's time to step out. That's all of us. Think tomorrow. Think about next week. If each one of you brought one visitor to church. Are you willing to step out? Are you looking around? And so I don't want this to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to pray for Greg because he's stepping out. Praise the Lord. And I might give a couple more dollars to him. the real question is, are you willing to step out and get out of your comfort zone? Get out of the comfort zone. Do something that is uncomfortable. Now, I went and taught soccer. Listen, it was not comfortable. I'm a basketball player. You know that. You know I taught Larry Bird how to play basketball, right? Or did I not tell you that before? But anyways, so here I lived all those years in Romania, played a little bit of soccer, but never really paid attention. I was like one of those kids in the class that just got a passing grade, but never knew what was going on. That's kind of how I was with soccer in Europe. And so I get here and say, Joe wants to play soccer, so I'm going to try it out. And I remember the first soccer practice. And I was going on YouTube, I was going this, and here I am, the big coach, and I have no idea what I'm doing. It was not comfortable. And it was just stepping out. And so, what are we doing that's uncomfortable to step out to reach people? And see people say, he's willing to go to Wales. Are we willing to go next door? Are we willing to get uncomfortable for Jesus and step out and see what God can do? Let's stand together. Heads bowed and eyes closed.
Draw me close to you. Never let me go. I lay it all down again to hear you say that I'm your friend. You are my desire. No one else will do. 'Cause nothing else can take your place. To feel the warmth of your embrace. Help me find the way. Bring me back to you. You're all I want. You're all I've ever needed. You're all I want. Help me know you are near. Draw me close to you. Never let me go. I lay it all down again to hear you say that I'm your friend. You are my desire. No one else will do, 'cause nothing else can take your place.